The Corinthian Oration by Favorinus, translated by Henry Lamar Crosby and published in the Discourses by Dio Chrysostom by the Loeb Classical Library, 1946. The Corinthian Oration by Favorinus. When I visited your city the first time nearly 10 years ago and gave your people and magistrates a sample of my eloquence, I seemed to be on friendly, yes, intimate, terms with you to a degree not equaled even by Arion of Methymne. At any rate, you do not have a statue made of Arion. Of course, when I say you, I am speaking of your forebears, and of Periander the sage, son of Cypselus, in whose day Arion flourished, being the first not only to compose a dithyramb, but also to call it by that name, and to present a dithyrambic chorus in Corinth. Now Arion was so dear to the gods, that when on his voyage back to Corinth, bringing great riches which he had the good fortune to win by his labors in the neighborhood of Tarentum, and among the Greeks of that region, as he was about to be cast into the sea by the sailors, no doubt because of that very wealth of his, he besought them ere they threw him overboard to let him sing, just as men say that swans about to die and foreseeing their death are wont, as it were, to put their soul on board the bark of song. So then he sang, to calm and silence brooded on the deep, and dolphins heard his song. And as they heard it, they rushed about the ship, and when Arion ceased and the sailors showed no relenting, he leapt into the sea, but a dolphin rose beneath him and carried the singer in safety to Tarentum, just as he was, gear and all. So then, Arion, saved in this manner, and having outstripped the sailors, was in Corinth narrating these very happenings to Periander. And when the sailors later entered the port, and the matter was brought to trial, the sailors were put to death. But Arion, not Periander, mark you, but Arion, ordering the bronze likeness of no great size, set it up at Tarentum, a likeness of himself astride the back of his benefactor. And about this same time Solon too came to Corinth, fleeing from the tyranny of Pisistratus, but not from that of Periander. No, for that was a different matter. While Pisistratus was tyrant of Athens, through having destroyed the democracy, Periander was tyrant through having received the royal power by inheritance from his father, whom the Greeks were wont to call tyrant, though the gods called him king. For is not this the way the oracle has it? A happy man is he, who, to my fane, doth come Aetion's Cypselus, the king of famous Corinth, he and his children too. One of these children was Periander himself, who succeeded his father. So then Periander, called king by the god, was proclaimed a sage by the Greeks. No better title did any king or tyrant ever gain. No, not even Antiochus, surnamed Divine, nor Mithridates, surnamed Dionysus, and even Pythicus of Mytilene might have been proud to be called at one and the same time both tyrant and sage, but as a matter of fact, in clinging to the second title, he stripped himself of his tyranny. Yet as for Periander, while he shared the name of sage with a few, and that of tyrant with many, as both tyrant and sage he stood alone. Well then, when Solon visited Periander and received a share of their common possessions, for the possessions of friends are held in common, still he received no statue, though surely he did not disdain a statue. No, he esteemed highly the honor of having had a bronze likeness of himself set up at Salamis. Then why not so at Corinth, the promenade of Hellas? Again, Herodotus, the historian, also paid you a visit, bringing tales of Greece, and in particular tales of Corinth. Not yet fallacious tales, in return for which he expected to receive pay from the city. But failing of obtaining even that, for your forebears did not deem it fitting to traffic in renown, he devised those tales we all know so well, the tales about Salamis and Adeimantus. However, in my own case, upon my second visit to Corinth, you were so glad to see me that you did your best to get me to stay with you. But seeing that to be impossible, you did have a likeness made of me, and you took this and set it up in your library, a front-row seat as it were, where you felt it would most effectively stimulate the youth to persevere in the same pursuits as myself. For you accorded me this honor, not as to one of the many who each year put in at Cancri, as traders or pilgrims or envoys or passing travelers, but as to a cherished friend, who at last, after a long absence, puts in an appearance. Yet honor, dreamlike, takes wing and flies away. Therefore I have come to be perplexed, not only as to my own case, but now, by heaven, as to that of someone else, as well, wondering whether I did not truly see, and what took place was not the happenings of my waking moments, but merely a dream, or whether the events were really so in all detail, both the enthusiasm of the populace and the decision of the council, and yet, as luck would have it, the statue was one of the works of Daedalus, and slipped away without our notice. However, not since the death of Daedalus down to the present day has anyone made such progress in the art of sculpture as to impart to bronze the power of flight. Nay, though they make statues of men with a fine and noble stride, and sometimes even riding on horseback, still these all maintain their pose and station, and unless someone moves them, so far as they are concerned, bronze has no power to flee, not even if the statue has wings, like the Perseus of Pythagoras. But supposing my statue to be actually of the ancient craftsmanship of Daedalus, for what strange reason would it have taken leave of your city? The city for which they say the two gods, Poseidon and Helios, vied with one another, the one being Lord of Fire, the other Lord of Water. And after the twain had striven and had entrusted the decision to a third god, who was their elder, whose heads were many, many too his arms, having, as I say, left to him the decision, they both have held the city and district ever since. Surely no slight or obscure sign of its superiority over all other cities, for while the others are portion and property of the gods individually, Argos of Hera and Athens of Athena, and while with reference to these very gods of whom I speak, Rhodes belong to Helios, and Onchestus to Poseidon, Corinth belongs to each of the two. You might imagine, since the myth suggests it, that the strip of land between two seas was an exceptional grant made by Helios because Poseidon wished it so. Now then, both myth and history, while singing in fair harmony on this theme, invite the Sibyl of prophetic song as the third of their trio of praise, and she, having obtained as her prerogative the voice of a god, sings aloud. What place to thee so happy as the blest isthmus of Ephyre, ocean's child, whereon Poseidon, sire of Lamia, mother mine, did first with Helios appoint the games, though his alone the honours there received? For the fact is, you know, men say not only that the contest was first established there by the two gods, but also that Castor won the single course, and Calais the double. For we are told that Calais ran, refraining from flying. But now that we have broached the subject, the others too, who were prize winners and victors, should be named. Orpheus was victorious with the lyre, Heracles in the rough and tumble, in boxing Polydeuces, in wrestling Peleus, in the discus Telamon, in the contest in armor Theseus. And there had been instituted also a contest for horses, and Phaethon won with a courser, and Neleus with a theme of 4. And there was also a boat race, in which Argo was the winner, and after that she sailed no more, but Jason dedicated her there to Poseidon, and he carved on her a couplet, which men say is the work of Orpheus. I am the good ship Argo, to God by Jason devoted, victor in Isthmian games, crowned with Nemean pine. But a place where gods control the games, and heroes, the victors and the vanquished, and Argo lies at rest. What a lovelier place than this could Daedalus himself discover as he flew with wings, to say nothing, of course, of the statue made by Daedalus. Nay, that statue of mine neither ran away, nor tried to do so, nor had any such intention at all. Therefore we are left to conclude that the Corinthians themselves banished it, not only without holding any trial, but also without having any charge at all to bring against it. And would anyone have believed this to the discredit of the Corinthians, whose forefathers were preeminent among the Greeks for cultivating justice? For I ask you, was it not they who put an end to the tyrannies in the cities and established the democracies, and freed Athens from her tyrants, first from Hippias and later from Cleomenes? And who after that, when Athenians themselves undertook to play the role of Hippias and Nicigarus, and to set up a tyranny over Hellas, being the first to sense what was going on, and being especially pained thereat, led the way to freedom for the others and maintained that purpose, not only in the case of the Athenians, but also in that of the Spartans. For example, in company with the state of Thebes and Elis, they opposed the Spartans in defense of the common right of Hellas. And by this act they also showed that they were not mere lovers of honor, but rather lovers of Hellas, of justice, of freedom, and haters of villainy and tyranny. Yes, and they were such haters of barbarians that they dispatched to Thermopylae 400 of their own troops on the same occasion on which the Spartans sent 300. And at Salamis they won the prize for valor and became responsible for the victory. For I pay no heed to Herodotus, but rather to the funeral monument and to Simonides, who composed the following epitaph for the Corinthian dead who were buried at Salamis. O stranger, once we dwelt in Corinth blessed, with fountains, now the Isle of Ajax holds our bones. With ease we took Phoenician ships, vanquished alike the Persians and the Medes, and saved our sacred Hellas from the foe. And Simonides also has another epitaph referring particularly to the commander himself. Here lies at Adamantus, by whose designs Greece abound about her brows fair freedom's crown. And what is more, the Corinthians also freed Sicily from the foreigner, and Syracuse too from her tyrants. And Dionysius was then to be seen in Corinth, a most glorious spectacle, shorn of all his power. And yet no one wronged even him, or tried to banish him, or to deprive him of the wealth he brought with him from Sicily. But who overturned the statue dedicated by the city? Of course, if it was a whirlwind, or a hurricane, or a thunderbolt that struck it, causing it to totter and darting lightning at it. But if it is a question of some trial of a statue, such as they say took place in Syracuse, but how it took place I shall not shrink from telling by way of parentheses. The Syracusans, your colonists, in the course of their many wars against the Carthaginians and the other aliens who dwelt in Sicily and Italy, had run short of bronze and currency. So they voted that the statues of their tyrants, most of the statues in their city were made of bronze, should be broken up, that is, after the people had held a trial to determine which of the statues deserved to be melted down and which did not. For you must hear this too. Gelon, son of Dinomenes, survived the trial. As for the others, they were all broken up, except, of course, the statue of Dionysius, the elder of the pair portrayed wearing the attributes of Dionysus. Then, supposing some such decree were to be passed in Corinth too, prescribing the statues should be subjected to an accounting, or rather, if you please, supposing this to have been already decreed and the trial to have been instituted, permit me, pray permit me, to make my plea before you in my own behalf, as if in court. Gentlemen of the jury, it is said that anything may be expected in the course of time, but he who stands before you is in jeopardy of first being set up as the noblest among the Greeks, and then being cast out as the worst, all in a brief span of time. Now then, to prove that I was set up fairly and justly and to the good of your city and to all the Greeks, I could speak at length. But there is one thing I do want to tell you which took place in the same Syracuse, for indeed the illustration is germane, and there may be justice in it too. Just as the people of Syracuse honor their mother city, so also it is well that you should follow the example of your colony. Very well. In those early days, because a certain Lucanian spoke Doric, in reporting some mission before the assembly, those Syracusans were so pleased by his dialect that they did not only send him home successful in the general purposes of his mission, but also pretended him with a talent and set up a likeness of him. And on that account the Syracusans won much commendation from the neighboring cities and from the Dorians of that region, especially from those who dwelt in Italy, who felt that they had requited the man in fine and elegant fashion in behalf of the Dorian race, whose dialect he had cultivated to the point of being actually eloquent in it. Well, if someone who was not a Lucanian but a Roman, not one of the masses but of the equestrian order, one who has affected not merely the language, but also the thought and manners and dress of the Greeks, and that too with such mastery and manifest success as no one among the Romans of early days, or of the Greeks of his own time, I must say, has achieved. For while the best of the Greeks over here may be seen inclining toward Roman ways, he inclined towards the Greek, and to that end is sacrificing both his property and his political standing, and absolutely everything, aiming to achieve one thing at the cost of all else, namely, not only to seem Greek, but to be Greek too. Taking all this into consideration, ought he not to have a bronze statue here in Corinth? Yes, and in every city, in yours, because though Roman, he has become thoroughly Hellenized, even as your own city has. In Athens, because he is Athenian in his speech. In Sparta, because he is devoted to athletics. In all cities everywhere, because he pursues the study of wisdom and already has not only roused many of the Greek to follow that pursuit with him, but also attracted even many of the barbarians. Indeed, it seems that he has been equipped by the gods for this express purpose. For the Greeks, so that the natives of that land may have an example before them to show that culture is no whit inferior to birth with respect to renown. For Romans, so that not even those who are wrapped up in their own self-esteem may disregard culture with respect to real esteem. For Celts, so that no one even of the barbarians may despair of attaining the culture of Greece when he looks upon this man. Well then, it is for some such reasons as these that I have been erected, not to expose myself to opprobrium by naming more, but in truth planning for the erection of a statue is not like planning for its tearing down. Why? Because each one of these statues, which have been erected by your city, be its subject better, be it worse, is at once invested with the attributes of sanctity, and the city should defend it as a votive offering. One might urge many reasons in support of the claim that Gorgias the sophist should not have a statue at Delphi, and what is more, a statue on a lofty basin made of gold. Why do I name Gorgias when you may see there are even Phryne of Thespiae perched on a pillar like Gorgias? However that may be, while it is possibly legitimate and within the rights of citizens to object at the outset, later on to go on and try to cancel the resolution authorizing the erection of a statue is by Apollo a grievous wrong, and none of the Amphictyons would have permitted. For indeed, if statues were erected wrongfully, once they have gained the advantage of having been erected, they hold their position rightfully from the moment they gain that advantage. For just as with the officials who are elected for a year, even if one of them is unworthy of holding office, he continues in office at least for the year for which he was elected. So also with statues, that term should be valid for which they were erected, and this term is all time to come. Otherwise, how will you differ from the men who fashion their images of clay? And what fine answer will you have to offer those who demand of you the reason why the honors in your city are mortal, but the dishonors immortal? If, then, this practice is in no wise disgraceful, as it certainly is shocking, what an absolute crazy government it is whose statues are annuals, like their crops. For men whom you honor with statues of bronze, not to have them desert you immediately, but to have them remain with you as long as possible, you show to be of softer stuff than even the images of wax. Or by heaven, would the excuse be that men thus honored were later on, as it happened, seen to be rogues? If they have turned rogues subsequently, that does not free the city of its guilt. For it is not because of what is to be, but rather because of what has been, that you confer your honors. If, on the other hand, a man who previously was a scoundrel was only subsequently discovered to be so, by which, of course, of action do you suppose you would be more likely to win esteem among the Greeks? And by which course would you more effectively appeal to those who wish to do you favors? By undoing your decision, or by abiding by what has been decided once and for all? As for myself, I believe it is by the second course of action, for the one course is that of men who have missed their aim, the other that of men of steady purpose. I have not yet mentioned that most important consideration, which is that so signal an honor should be upset, if at all not in consequence of slander, but by due process of law, and not for some casual fault, but only for the greatest. For so far as slander is concerned, even Socrates might be a corrupter of youth, and a subverter of all the cherished beliefs of men, beginning with the gods. For whom have these men failed to slander who slander anyone at all? Have not they slandered Socrates, Pythagoras, Plato? Have they not slandered Zeus himself, Poseidon, Apollo, and all the other gods? And they lay impious hands even upon the female deities, for whom they might be expected to feel even more reverence than for the male. Aye, by heaven, for you hear what they say of Demeter, and Aphrodite, and Eos. And they do not keep their hands off even Athena or Artemis. On the contrary, they strip Artemis naked for Actaeon, and they unite Athena with Hephaestus, and almost make a mother of the Virgin. Therefore, knowing all this as you do, are you surprised if there has been spread abroad against this man to some censure, a thing which absolutely none of those who have lived distinguished lives has had the power to escape, but which in his case is based upon the charm of his eloquence, or whatever one should call the gift, to which you yourselves, along with women and children, give approval? Will you not consider the matter? Will you not test your memory to see whether any such thing has been done by him in Corinth? Although you live in a city favored by Aphrodite beyond all that are or ever have been, nevertheless you have heard nothing of that sort regarding him, and I venture to assert no other Greek has either. Then do you believe that the man who has lived a decent life in Greece, in the midst of greater license and indulgence, has suffered transformation in Rome, in the presence of the emperor himself and the laws? Why, there is very much as if one were to say of the athlete that, although he privately keeps his rules, in the stadium and in the presence of the master of the games, he violates the code. However, I hold freedom of speech to be a two-sided matter. One side is that of a man who has knowledge of some misdeed, the other is that of the master of the games. If the latter has given credence to an accusation, he will exact full satisfaction from the wrongdoer. But a man who has heard a report of it will turn informer, which is precisely what the man in question did. But when you follow the lead of persons who, however, I shall say nothing of them by way of retaliation, save only that it would have been more proper for them to follow your lead than for you to follow theirs. For you are now, as the saying goes, both prow and stern of Hellas, having been called prosperous and wealthy, and the like by poets and gods from olden days, days when some of the others too had wealth and might. But now, since wealth has deserted both Orchomenus and Delphi, though they may surpass you in exciting pity, none can do so in exciting envy. Now these remarks have been offered in the interest of the city, which must not suffer disgrace in the eyes of the other Greeks, seeing that all men not merely welcome with delight him whom you have banished, but even send for him and dispatch him on missions here and there, and, among other things, show him honor by actually erecting statues of him. On the other hand, I shall now, in my own behalf, and in behalf of my statue, use a phrase which Anaxagoras used when he had lost a son. I knew I had begotten a mortal. However, I did not know that my progeny was as mortal as that. For though each statue is erected as if were to last forever, still they perish by this fate or by that, the most common and most fitting fate, and the one ordained for all things being the fate of time. And the poet was idly boasting who composed this epitaph, which, they say, has been inscribed on the funeral mound of Midas. A maid of bronze am I mark the grave of Midas. While water flows and trees grow tall, here will I bide by the tear-drenched tomb, and tell the passers-by that Midas lies here. Well, my self-announcing maiden, we hear indeed the poet's words, but though we sought, we found not thee, nor yet the tomb of Midas. And though those waters still flow, and those trees still thrive, in time even they are likely to vanish with the rest, like Midas, like maiden. Hippamon the man was called, Podargus his horse, Lethargus his hound, and Bobis his serving man. Well, now, who of the Greek race knows, I won't say the horse, but Hippamon himself? None, I fancy, even at Magnesia, whence Hippamon came. He, then, has vanquished from the sight of men, Bobis, Podargus, and all. However, the statues of other men still stand, and are known though they wear the label of others, and what is going on is like an antipas in poetry, and, as one might say, the authors give counter-information. Greek character, but Roman fortune. I have even seen Alcibiades, the handsome son of Cleinias, I know not where, but I saw him in a commanding sight in Greece, wearing the label of Chalcopagon, and also another likeness of him with both arms lopped off, a likeness said to have been the work of Pollicles. Ye gods, a fearsome spectacle, Alcibiades a cripple. And I know that Harmodius and Aristogeiton have served as slaves in Persia, and that 1,500 statues of Demetrius and Phalerum have all been pulled down by the Athenians on one and the same day. Aye, they have even dared to empty chamber pots on King Philip. Yes, the Athenians poured urine on his statue, but he poured on their city blood and ashes and dust. In fact, it was enough to arouse righteous indignation that they should class the same man now among the gods, and now not even among human beings. Then, knowing as I do that men spare not even the gods, should I imagine you to have been concerned for the statue of a mere mortal? Furthermore, while I think I shall say nothing of the others, at any rate the Isthmian, your own master of the games, Mummius, tore from his base and dedicated to Zeus. Disgusting ignorance, illiterate creature that he was, totally unfamiliar with the proprieties, treating the brother as a votive offering. It was he who took the Philip, son of Amyntas, which he got from Thespiae, and labeled it Zeus, and also the lads from Phaneus he labeled Nestor and Priam respectively. But the Roman mob, as might have been expected, imagined they were beholding those very heroes, and not mere Arcadians from Phaneus. Indeed, you may well laugh at these doings, but in all seriousness, it has occurred to me to congratulate Agesilaus, king of Sparta, on the stand he took, for he never thought it fitting to have either a statue or a portrait made of himself, not because he was deformed, as people say, and short, for what was to hinder the statue being tall, or having shapely legs, like Euphranor Hephaestus, but rather because he saw clearly that one should not try to prolong the allotted span of human life, or expose the body to the vicissitudes of stone or bronze. Would that it might be possible to take leave even of the body which we have. But farewell to Daedalus, and to the imitative devices of that artist. Enough of Prometheus, enough of clay. In fact, it is said that even the body of noble souls is foreign substance, for very many things do lie between body and soul. For the soul is not present when the body is outworn, nor is it concerned for it. Cambyses was mad when, as if it were Amasis, the king of the Egyptians, he stabbed and flogged his dead body. To be sure, the Egyptians say that Amasis, having long viewed with distrust the cruelty of Cambyses, caused his own body to be hid away, and another to be substituted for it, and that this was the corpse which fell in the way of Cambyses. However, O ye Egyptians and Cambyses too, no matter whether it was someone else who suffered this treatment or Amasis himself, at all events it was a form sans blood, sans flesh, sans soul. This, so please you, you may drag, you may rend, you may stab, yet real Amasis you have failed to catch. Again, another man who was endowed with life and breath and feeling exclaimed, Grind, grind the sack of Anaxarchus, for the real Anaxarchus you do not grind. You see, this man, having been thrown into a mortar and being pounded by the pestles, declared that he himself was not being ground, but only that thing of his in which, as it chanced, he had been enclosed, just as we are told that the peers of the realm in Persia are beaten, their cloak instead of their body. Well then, though Persians may resent so slight a chastisement, a Greek allowed his body to be pounded as if it were a cloak. And shall I not allow my statue to go to the melting pot, even supposing it to have sensation? But as matters stand, while Anaxarchus was superior to sensation, I, in the language of Euripides' Laodamea, would not desert a friend, though void of life. Accordingly, I wish to speak words of comfort to my friend, my statue, as to one possessing sensation. O thou mute semblance of my eloquence, art thou not visible? Nor more was Aristeas visible, who lived before thee, for he too had this experience, as I conjecture, the experience of being raised up by the men of Proconnesus, and then being spirited away by his foes, and of having a tale disseminated by these same men to the effect that Aristeas was not to be seen, either living or dead. However, Aristeas was alive then, lives now, and will live always. Someone, I ween, will yet remember me. As Sappho very beautifully says, and far more beautifully Hesiod. But fame is never utterly destroyed, which many people voice, a goddess she. I myself will raise thee up, and place thee in the precinct of the goddess, whence naught shall tear thee down, not earthquake, or wind, or snow, or rain, or jealousy, or foe, but lo, even now I find thee in thy station, aye, ere now forgetfulness has tripped and cheated sundry others too. But judgment plays no tricks on any man of worth, and 'tis because of this that thou standest upright for me like a man. End of the Corinthian Oration by Favorinus. Translated by Henry Lamar Crosby and published in the Discourses by Dio Chrysostom by the Loeb Classical Library, 1946.